courtroom filled with doubt and mockery. Few expected what came next. When a judge underestimated Ibrahim Traoré and laughed at his appearance and arguments, the entire courtroom was about to witness an unforgettable turnaround. Watch how Traoré's unexpected legal brilliance silences the critics and turns the tables in the most stunning way. The heavy doors of the courtroom creaked open. Ibrahim Traoré stepped inside, not with grand clothes or a team of lawyers, but with quiet determination. People turned their heads. Some scoffed, some smirked. He wasn't dressed in a fancy suit. His boots were dusty, his face serious, his hands steady. In the corner, a man whispered, "Is he lost?" Another laughed. "This will be over in minutes." Even the judge, an older man with a golden robe and a sharp tongue, sneered when Ibrahim introduced himself. "You represent yourself?" He chuckled. "This will be amusing." The entire room echoed with soft laughter. But Ibrahim didn't flinch. He placed his worn briefcase on the table, opened it, pulled out a thick stack of papers, handwritten, dog-eared, but filled with heart. Somewhere in the back, a woman with tired eyes sat up straighter. She saw something the others didn't. What they all failed to see was that this was no ordinary man, and today would be no ordinary day. The judge banged his gavel, signaling the start of proceedings. Still smiling smugly, he leaned forward and said, "Make your case, Mr. Traoré, if you can." The room leaned forward too, ready to watch a man they underestimated fail. Ibrahim stood. His voice at first was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. "Your Honor," he said, "I stand here not because I have money or power, but because I have something more important: truth." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Was he serious? Then, slowly, methodically, Ibrahim began. He laid out facts so clear, so undeniable that even the laughter stopped. He pulled out records. He pointed to laws that others forgot existed. He quoted judges from decades ago, connecting history to every heart of his case. Each word tightened the room like a noose of truth. No fancy words, no shouting, just pure, unstoppable clarity. By the time he finished his opening argument, the courtroom wasn't laughing anymore. The judge wasn't smiling either. And somewhere in that heavy silence, respect was quietly being born. The judge, red-faced and rattled, cleared his throat. "You're clever," he admitted, voice tight. "But cleverness isn't enough." He tried to find holes. He called on witnesses meant to crush Ibrahim's case. Each witness entered the stand with a smirk, certain they would destroy him. But Ibrahim didn't panic. He didn't yell. He didn't tremble. Hesked simple questions. Questions so sharp, so clean, they sliced throughlies like a hot knife through butter. One witness faltered, another stammered, another outright admitted the truth. The courtroom, once full of mockery, now leaned in closer. No one dared look away. "Where did you get this knowledge?" someone whispered from the back. Ibrahim didn't need a fancy school to learn. He learned from dusty books by candlelight, from listening more than he spoke, from caring more about justice than about winning. Each moment he spoke, the room filled with something rare and powerful: hope. In 3 short hours, he had turned a laughing crowd into silent believers. And yet, the biggest test was still to come. The judge wasn't ready to let go. And Ibrahim was about to face the hardest cross-examination of his life. The judge, now realizing that Ibrahim was no ordinary man, decided to set a final cruel trap. He asked a complex legal question, one so twisted that even seasoned lawyers had stumbled over it before. The courtroom held its breath. This was supposed to break Ibrahim, make him stutter, make him sweat, make him run. But Ibrahim simply closed his eyes for a moment. He wasn't searching for words. He was remembering. Remembering the countless nights he sat under a weak light, reading dusty law books alone. Remembering the faces of villagers who believed in him. Remembering that this wasn't just about winning, it was about truth. Ibrahim opened his eyes, looked straight at the judge, and answered slowly, clearly, powerfully. He not only answered the question, he explained it so simply that even a child could understand. By the time he finished, even the court reporter had stopped typing, stunned at the beauty of his explanation. The judge's face tightened. He realized this young man wasn't fighting for pride. He was fighting for something far bigger. And he was winning. The people in the courtroom were changing. At first they had come to mock, to laugh, to witness an easy defeat. But now they leaned forward, hearts pounding. An old man in the back wiped his eyes. A young woman clutched her necklace and whispered a prayer. Even the guards by the door looked at Ibrahim with something close to awe. Every time he spoke, he brought light into a room that had been dark for too long. His words weren't just legal arguments. They were music. They were truth made simple. The courthouse walls, thick with years of injustice and corruption, seemed to tremble. Ibrahim wasn't just winning a case. He was waking people up, reminding them that courage wasn't about wealth or fame or perfect clothes. Courage was standing up when everyone expects you to fall and standing taller every time they try to push you down. Still, deep inside the judge's heart, a storm was brewing. He wouldn't give up easily, and the hardest moment of all was coming fast. On the third day of the trial, as the sun hung heavy in the sky, something unexpected happened. A powerful lawyer entered the courtroom, sent by those who feared Ibrahim's success. They whispered to the judge. They handed him secret papers. Outside, rumors swirled. They're trying to bury him. They'll never let him win. The judge announced a sudden twist. New evidence would be introduced. Ibrahim calmly accepted it. No fear crossed his face. When the new lawyer spoke, he used fancy words, long, confusing speeches, complicated tricks. For a moment, doubt flickered in the crowd. Was this the end? But Ibrahim didn't panic. He knew the truth. Real strength doesn't come from having the loudest voice. It comes from having the clearest heart. Slowly, piece by piece, he pulled apart the lies. He showed how the new evidence was nothing but smoke and mirrors. His voice never shook. His hands never trembled. In that moment, the people realized, you can bring an army against one honest man, but you cannot defeat the truth. And Ibrahim Traoré was the living proof of it. The fourth day of the trial felt heavier than the rest. Clouds gathered outside. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. The new lawyer threw question after question at Ibrahim, fast, aggressive, like stones hurled to break him down. And still, Ibrahim stood firm. He didn't rush. He didn't stumble. Instead, with each answer, he built a bridge between himself and the hearts of the people. For the first time, even the judge couldn't hide the unease in his eyes, because now the courtroom was no longer laughing. Now the people were listening, hanging on every word, feeling every truth. An old woman sitting near the front wiped tears from her wrinkled cheeks. She whispered to her neighbor, "We are watching history being made." And in that moment, a shift happened. This wasn't just a trial anymore. It was a battle for the soul of justice itself, and Ibrahim Traoré, underestimated and mocked, was leading the charge, one honest word at a time. Just when the courtroom thought they had seen it all, Ibrahim pulled a worn envelope from his folder. He raised it gently, showing everyone. "This," he said quietly, "is the truth they tried to hide." The judge tried to object. The opposing lawyer stood up in panic. But it was too late. The letter, a forgotten testimony from a brave worker who had risked everything, laid out the corruption and lies of the people standing against Ibrahim, written by a trembling hand, signed with hope, hidden for months. As Ibrahim read the words aloud, the courtroom fell silent. You could hear the breaths catch. You could feel the collective heartbreaking. The letter spoke of stolen rights, of families broken, of dreams crushed under the weight of greed. It ended simply, "If anyone reads this, please fight for us." Tears streamed down faces that had once been filled with mockery. The truth wasn't complicated. It wasn't pretty. It was raw. It was real. And it was impossible to ignore. And in that moment, Ibrahim wasn't just a man defending a case. He was the voice of a people who had been silenced for too long. By the fifth day, something had changed in the judge. The laughter lines on his face had hardened into something else, something like shame. He could barely meet Ibrahim's steady gaze. The people could feel it too. The man they had doubted, the man they had laughed at was now the man who carried their broken hopes on his shoulders without shouting, without insults, without anger, just with truth and the quiet, fierce dignity of someone who knew he was right. When Ibrahim finished presenting the letter, there was no applause. There was just a deep, aching silence, the kind of silence that happens right before the rain falls. And in that silence, the judge did something no one expected. He gently nodded, a small, almost invisible gesture. But it was enough. It was an apology, an admission, a surrender. The courtroom, once filled with doubt and cruelty, was now filled with something entirely different. Respect, gratitude, and a love for a leader who had not abandoned them, even when the world turned its back. And yet, the biggest test was still to come. The verdict. The moment that would change everything forever. The 6th day of the trial began, not with noise but with silence. No one jeered, no one whispered. Even the reporters scribbled their notes quietly, afraid to break the sacred stillness that had fallen over the courtroom. Ibrahim stood alone again, his suit still plain, his hands steady. The opposing lawyer shuffled papers nervously. He had no more tricks, no more lies to hide behind. As Ibrahim spoke, he didn't just talk about the law. He talked about the fathers who lost their land, the mothers who buried their dreams, the children who grew up believing justice was just a fairy tale. Each word was a stone placed carefully on the foundation of truth. You could feel it, the walls shaking, the ground trembling under the weight of undeniable honesty. Even the judge, once mocking, now leaned forward as if trying to grasp every single word, afraid to miss a piece of this living history. And as Ibrahim finished his quiet, powerful speech, there was no clapping, no shouting, only the sound of hearts breaking wide open. It was Ibrahim's last chance to speak before the judge ruled. The air was heavy, as if the entire city had pressed its ear against the courtroom walls, waiting. Ibrahim paused. He looked around, not with arrogance, not with pride, but with deep humbling love. Then in the simplest words he told a story about a young boy in a tiny village in Burkina Faso who once believed that justice belonged only to the rich and powerful. How that boy had seen his neighbors lose everything, seen good men cry in the dark where no one could see them. How that boy had promised himself that one day he would stand for those who had no one else. That boy was him, Ibrahim Traoré. He spoke, not for himself but for all the invisible, forgotten souls who had trusted him to carry their voices into rooms where no one had listened before. And when he finished, he did not beg for mercy. He did not shout for victory. He simply said, "Let truth be enough." A single tear rolled down the cheek of the courtroom clerk, and for the first time in the trial, even the judge looked away, blinking, hard. The judge announced he would deliver the verdict the next day, the final 7th day of the trial. The courtroom emptied slowly, people walking out with heavy steps, hearts pounding. Some prayed, some cried, everyone felt it. Tomorrow wasn't just about Ibrahim. It was about whether truth could still win in a world so used to betrayal. Ibrahim stayed behind for a while, sitting quietly on the old wooden bench. He wasn't a man crushed by fear. He was a man who had given everything, every word, every breath, and now simply waited. Outside the courtroom, crowds gathered under the setting sun. They didn't chant. They didn't protest. They stood in silence, holding candles, holding each other. Old farmers who had never seen a courtroom before. Young students who had almost given up believing in heroes. Mothers clutching pictures of sons lost to injustice. All united by one man's courage. By the hope that maybe, just maybe, good could still. Defeatful, as night fell over the city, a single cry rose into the dark. "We stand with Ibrahim." And the cry echoed across rooftops, across rivers, across hearts, because tomorrow everything would change, forever. The morning came heavy with clouds. It wasn't raining, but the air was thick with waiting, the kind of waiting that wraps around your chest and makes every breath feel heavier. Ibrahim arrived at the courthouse alone. No convoy, no bodyguards, just him. carrying nothing but the quiet power of truth. The streets were packed. Thousands lined the sidewalks in total silence, heads bowed, candles in trembling hands. Even those who had once laughed at him stood still, faces pale, realizing this was no ordinary day. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered, papers trembling slightly in his hand. He glanced at Ibrahim, not with mockery this time, but with something close to fear and maybe even respect. Ibrahim bowed his head, whispering a silent prayer, not for himself, but for all those who needed this moment to believe in justice again. The verdict was just minutes away. The whole world seemed to be holding its breath, and somewhere, deep in the hearts of the forgotten, a new hope flickered. Fragile, but fiercely alive. The judge cleared his throat, his voice cracking slightly. In the case of the people versus the powers of corruption, he began. You could have heard a pin drop. He looked up and met Ibrahim's steady, calm eyes, and in that glance, something unspoken passed between them. The heavy weight of truth undeniable and unbroken. The judge continued, We find in favor of the people. Justice shall be restored. At first there was no sound, just stunned silence. Then, like a dam breaking, a wave of sobs, cheers, and raw emotion exploded through the courtroom. Old men wept openly, young children clutched their mothers tighter. Journalists dropped their pens, hands shaking, tears blurring their notes. Ibrahim did not jump for joy. He simply placed a hand over his heart and bowed his head, a silent thank you to every soul who had believed when it was hardest. Outside, bells rang out from churches and mosques alike. People hugged strangers. Songs rose up in the streets and across the nation. Across the world, one name was whispered with awe and pride. Ibrahim Traoré, a man who proved that sometimes the smallest voice can shake the heavens. As Ibrahim stepped out of the courthouse, the crowd parted like a river opening for a ship. They didn't cheer wildly. Instead, they raised their hands in quiet salute, a sign of deep, sacred respect. A little girl ran up to him. Her dress was torn, her shoes were broken, but in her tiny, trembling hands, she held out a single red flower, the last bloom from her family's struggling garden. For you, she whispered, eyes shining. Ibrahim knelt down, took the flower gently, and tucked it into his jacket pocket close to his heart. He lifted the little girl up so she could see the endless sea of faces. And softly he said, You are why we fight. The girl's eyes widened in wonder, and somewhere in the crowd, her mother burst into tears. That day, Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just a leader. He became a symbol, a living reminder that courage, kindness, and truth can still light the darkest paths. And the world would never forget this week, and the man who changed everything with nothing but faith, honesty, and a heart that refused to give up. As Ibrahim walked through the celebrating crowd, a strange quietness fell. It wasn't because people weren't happy. It was because the emotion was too big forwards. Old men who had once fought wars fell to their knees, reaching out to touch his hand. Mothers lifted their babies high into the air as if to say, This is the future you have given us. One elderly woman, her face wrinkled by time and hardship, pressed a worn photograph into Ibrahim's hand. It was a picture of Herson, a young man who had died fighting for a justice he never lived to see. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, Today you gave me back my son's dream. Ibrahim held the photo close, his eyes shining with unshed tears. In that moment, the courtroom victory was no longer just a legal win. It was a resurrection, a revival of lost hopes, a promise that their sacrifice had not been in vain. And as the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in a long time, the people of Burkina Faso believed not just in him, but in themselves again. The celebrations carried on, but Ibrahim slipped away quietly. No interviews, no grand speeches, just Aman walking alone under the wide-open African sky. He returned to a small village, the one where he grew up. There, barefoot children played in the dust. Old women pounded millet in wooden bowls. Life was simple and beautiful. Sitting under a giant baobab tree, Ibrahim closed his eyes and listened. The laughter, the wind, the heartbeat of a nation healing. The village chief approached him carrying a woven mat. "We saved this for you," he said. It was nothing fancy, just a simple hand-woven mat. But it was a symbol of home, of humility, of roots that no courtroom power could ever touch. Ibrahim knelt and accepted it with both hands. "No matter how high the storm lifts you," the chief said softly, "never forget the ground that made you strong." And Ibrahim promised silently that he never would. The next morning, Ibrahim returned to the capital. He didn't come back with fanfare. He came back with purpose. Standing before a gathering of students, elders, farmers, and soldiers, he spoke, not like a president, but like a brother. "I am not here to rule over you," he said, voice steady. "I am here to remind you the power has always been yours." He pointed to the people, to their hands, to their hearts. "You are the builders of this country. Never again let anyone tell you otherwise." The crowd, thousands strong, began to weep openly. Not tears of sorrow, but tears of hope, tears of pride, tears of awakening. And as they cried, something magical happened. They didn't just see Ibrahim Traoré as their leader. They saw him as their mirror, reflecting back the strength, courage, and dignity they'd always carried inside. That week, within just 7 days, a courtroom had been transformed into a cathedral of hope, and a man once doubted and mocked had become a legend. Friends, if this story touched your heart, if it made you believe again, in truth, courage, and justice, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling me what part of Ibrahim Traoré's journey inspired you the most. Your comment might just inspire someone else. Let's spread this message far and wide. Together, let's remind the world, never judge a person by what you see, because inside every heart beats the power to change everything. Subscribe now. Like, share, comment, and never ever stop believing.